have you ever spent hours knitting a complex lace or cable pattern only to realize you made a mistake 10 rows ago? Ripping back your work can feel terrifying, but there's a simple tool that can save your stitches and your sanity: Lifelines. In today's tutorial, I'll show you exactly what Lifelines are, how to use them, and why they're an absolute game changer for your knitting. A lifeline is a strand of scrap yarn, embroidery floss, or even dental floss that you insert into your stitches as a safety net. If you make a mistake, you can easily rip back to that lifeline without worrying about losing stitches or picking them up incorrectly. Lifelines are especially helpful when working with lace, cables, any pattern where mistakes can be tricky to fix, or when you're trying something new. Now, if you've ever tried to fix a mistake in a complicated pattern, you know the struggle. Dropped stitches, twisted stitches, you can even lose an entire section of your work. Some knitters avoid using lifelines because it is an extra step. But trust me, it's one of those things that saves time and frustration in the long run. Plus, I'll show you some simple tricks to make them super easy to insert. Here's how to insert a lifeline into your knitting. First, choose your lifeline material. Use smooth scrap yarn, making sure that it's the same gauge or smaller than the yarn you're using for your project. Or embroidery floss, or my favorite is dental floss. And I keep a pack of dental floss in my project bag because it's thin, smooth, easy to work with, and there's lots here. So make sure you get out a nice long section. And thread your darning needle. Using a generous length of floss is better. It's better too long than too short. You want the ends to extend past both edges of your knitting. And then you just need to insert your lifeline. If you're using circular needles, like I am here, slide your stitches to the cable. That gives you extra space to work with. Then with your darning needle, weave the lifeline through the stitches from right to left, making sure not to catch any stitch markers or row counters. Now you can choose to include those stitch markers, but keep in mind you will need additional ones to add in on your next row. So just scoop them up in small sections. I'm going to move my row counter out of the way. Just like that. I find it easier to pick up a few stitches at a time, depending on how many stitch markers you have in your work as well. Move my cable up and out of the way. I'll zoom in a little more for you. To go around my stitch marker. I don't want, in this case, I don't want to keep my stitch markers. And there we have it. The next thing you need to do is mark your row. Take note of the row number where you placed your lifeline. This is gonna save you frustration down the road. If you're worried about it slipping out, just tie a little knot in the end. And then it's not gonna come undone. And finally, when you're working your next row after you have inserted your lifeline, keep the lifeline snug so that it stays in place smoothly. This will make it easier to slide those stitches back onto your needle in the case of needing to rip back to your lifeline. So let me show you what I mean here. This lifeline right here can start getting a little loose as you work along in your pattern. So see how I'm keeping it held down with my hand, my spare fingers. And then it's getting a little loose there. So when I go to make my next stitch, just give it a little tug so that it stays out of the way. Okay, and that's all there is to it. To make lifelines even easier and more effective, keep these tips in mind. Insert a lifeline every time you reach a point you wouldn't want to rip back past. Think of them like checkpoints in your knitting. So if you don't want to rip back 10 rows, maybe insert a lifeline every 5 rows. If you are using interchangeable needles, some have a hole where the cable and needle join, like this one, right there. You can thread a lifeline right through there and work it into your row as you knit along. But be careful. This will also thread it through your stitch markers, making them immovable. And finally, you don't need to remove old lifelines. Just keep adding new ones as you progress. You never know when you might need to go back. Lifelines are just one of many little tricks that can make your knitting more enjoyable and stress-free, but keeping track of where you place them can be just as important as using them. So be sure to take note of their placement. And if you don't print patterns, I created a Lifeline Tracker. It's a simple printable tool to help you keep organized while working on your more complex projects. No more second guessing where your last lifeline was or when to add the next one, as I have been guilty of doing. You can grab it by clicking the link below or heading to bit.ly/Lifeline Tracker. And if you found this tutorial helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your knitting friends. Thanks!